Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome an accomplished entrepreneur from the world of healthcare from Hyderabad, India, Anu Acharya. Anu, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Ashutosh.
Anu is the Chief Executive Officer of Mapmygenome. She is a member of the Young Global Leaders of the World Economic Forum. And given the amount of work that she's done, understandably, Anu has been recognized, awarded, and felicitated several times. So, Anu, my first question to you, tell me about your own journey in brief and what inspired you to venture into the field of genomics?
Sure. So I actually, my genes are from Rajasthan, but I grew up in Bengal and I went to study in IIT Kharagpur. And then I think, even though when I was a child, I wanted to be a physicist, I think very quickly I realized that was not my calling. Went to the US, I was doing a couple of masters over there, and then decided that I should move more into the world of startups. And at that point, I first joined a startup company in the telecom space, nothing to do with genomics. And then we had our, who then became our co-founder, reached out to us around 96, 97 and said, why don't you get into bioinformatics and genomics and all that? And we were like, what is that, right? And there was no Google. We searched on InfoSeek. We found 3 hits. So we said, it sounds interesting. And it was just around the time that the human genome was about to get completed. It finally got completed in 2000, 2001. And that was around the time I started my first company called Ossimum Bio. And that was with truly no experience in the space, but it was more excitement around, just deciphering your own software, if you will, right? So I think that's how I got started with Ossimum. And with Ossimum, I think we then moved back to India in 2001. We started it, and it was quite an interesting journey. We did 3 international acquisitions with literally, I think, no funding in the beginning. And then we had the World Bank, we had another private equity firm that came in. So we had put in together these 3 companies. But I think as we went along, we became one of the largest genomic services players worldwide. Wow. But there was still something that was bothering me. And that was that when you look at the world of personalized medicine, there was very less representation from the Indian data or our own databases. And ultimately, we are 1/6 of the world's population, but very less representation. Right. So I think for me, that was the point where I said, maybe I need to get into, the whole consumer genomics or to be able to build that in India. And so I started a second company called Mapmygenome in 2013. Amazing. I started with one product called Genome Patri. But today, I think we have a full portfolio of products, both on the consumer or the personal genomic side and also on the clinical side.
Amazing. Amazing. Thank you for sharing this. But let me ask you a very basic question, and I'm sure you've been asked this many times. What is genomics and how does it differ from genetics?
Sure. So basically, I think if you take any cell in your body, and there are trillions of them, there are 4 letters that sort of encode it, right? That's how your whole DNA is. So it's written in A, C, T, and G, just like we have A, B, C, D, 26 letters in English, and so on. Our code in which we are written is written in these 4 letters, right? So A, C, T's, and G's. Now, genetics is basically, typically you're saying that how do I understand specific parts of it? Like if there is a problem in one gene, or then you are looking at it as a genetics. When you look at the overall composition, you're looking at all your DNA, you're looking at the entire genome, then that's called genomics, right? So you're looking at multiple genes, the effect of multiple genes, and so on. So that's genomics and also genetics, but many times they are they are also used interchangeably also.
Right, yeah. Right.
So I think that's what we are seeing. I think what has come out of genomics are some really fascinating things, right? You're looking at ways of how does genomics impact health? How does it impact where you come from? How does it impact what you eat, how you exercise? But it also, I think today we are starting to see that genomics is also helping us understand the epigenomics, which is what is over the genetics, or understand what's going on in your gut. So I think that's how it has progressed and where we are today.
Amazing, thank you. And Anu, how can genomics be utilized to improve preventive healthcare?
So I think if you think about it, this is like your baseline, right? Like that's how your body functions. You were born with that. You get 50% of your genes from your mom and 50% from your dad. And what you get at birth, a lot of those genes, those are all still the same that is there in every single cell of your body. Now, there are some things that do change, for instance, in cancer and so on. But in general, I think what your basic, the germline or the hereditary genes remain the same, right? Now, what we can do is to understand how your body functions. And so, for instance, if you take like a type 2 diabetes or let's say ACTN3, which is your sprint gene, you are basically saying what genes have an effect on this. So there'll be multiple genes, or it's called a polygenic risk code, right? So you are looking at multiple genes and how they actually affect the outcome, whether it's a type 2 diabetes, hypertension, or anything else like that. So once you understand that you are predisposed to it in a certain way, then what you do is you're making those changes, because in most cases, in most diseases like type 2 diabetes or cardiovascular diseases and others, there is a very large component that is ruled by your lifestyle, what you eat, how you're exercising, and so on. So once you know what your genetic predisposition is, you're likely to make those changes. And I often tell people it's like Google Maps, right? Like, you want to get from point A to point B. If you know there is a blockage on this road, you take another route, right? It's the same thing. I think when you know that you can't get to it the same way, you will make those extra efforts to find a different route to a healthier life. So that's what it is.
Thank you. What a great explanation. Thank you. And my next question, Anu, is how does Mapmygenome use the genomic data to create personalized health solutions?
Sure. So like I was mentioning, there is a lot of, when you can decode your genetic information, you are looking at either looking at sequencing the entire genome. When you do that, sometimes that goes almost up to 90 GB of data, or you're looking at specific parts of the genome, right? Or what we call as the markers. Once so when people typically, let's say, place an order for a preventive test, typically you get a saliva sample, and then you send the sample across to us. We would then either do genotyping, which would be specific parts of the genome, or you're sequencing the entire thing. And once you get the data, then we take those specific markers that we call, and then we have our algorithm that is doing the risk coding. So what we do, for instance, in Genome Patri would be that you get this data, and let's say you got data for 700,000 markers, right? Or you're doing the entire 90 GB of data. You will take the markers that are relevant for each specific either disease or food or things like sleep duration and others, and then we create a report. And in that report, we give what we call as a relative risk, which means that you are predisposed to a certain thing, either at the same level as others, or you are likely to have a higher risk than somebody else. So if, let's say, since I started with type 2 diabetes, I'll go back to that. If 1 out of 5 Indians are likely to be predisposed to diabetes, that's your incidence.
Correct.
But for some people, they may be higher or lower, and I think that's what we give them. Then we counsel them, right? So you get the data, you get a report. Then we say, how do you connect that back to your family history, and then give them personalized action so that they can actually then not get that disease. So that's basically how we are doing it.
Wow.
And similarly, I think there is a product that we have called MedicaMap, right? So since you are very familiar with medications and medicines, I think what we would do in that is that some medicines work well for some people. In some cases, some people metabolize them faster, some metabolize them slower. Or it might be that for some people that medicine is not going to be is going to be toxic, right? So there are guidelines today that will tell you based on your specific genetic variants whether that medicine is likely to work for you and in what dosage, or if it is going to be toxic for you, then how do you actually use how do you actually then give an alternative to that patient? So that's another thing that we do. So we look at 165 drugs, and then we tell them what is it that what is likely to work. So however the doctor wants to prescribe. So if it is, let's say, clopidogrel, which is a common drug, will it work and in what dosage, right? So a lot of cardiologists would use that information to then decide whether, one, they need to give clopidogrel to that patient, and two, what dosage they need to do.
Amazing. Thank you. My next question, when I was preparing for my conversation with you, I was also fascinated with Mapmygenome's health score for longevity. How does this work?
So I think health, as all of us know, is not a singular piece of information, right? Like genetics is one thing which is a constant, but I think all of us know that, even if you have the same genes, someone has a better outcome versus the other. And so what we did was that we said we'll take data that is coming from your blood reports, data that's coming from, let's say, your watch, ring, and various other forms. And then how do you put all those pieces together so that you can then get a overall score, right? And I think that's what we started doing with the GBiome, where we said, we started first with cardiovascular. We first trained the data on data that came from UK Biobank and other data that we already had. Then we used data that came from your blood reports and other parameters, put those pieces together, use machine learning, and then come up with the score. So that's how we started with cardiovascular. Then we went to oncology and a few other areas. And I think our aim was that how do you simplify this whole experience for the consumer? Because even though health is complicated, I think consumers want a simple solution. Right. So that's the attempt. And today we are also looking at other parameters like your microbiome, because we found that pretty much every disease is connected to your microbiome, which is in your gut, what bacteria you have, what viruses you have, and so on. And then also the newer science that is coming up, which is the whole biological age and understanding of, what the environment or your lifestyle has done to that. So I think those are other pieces that we have been able to put in. And right now we have also partnered with a company to sort of put all of this in an app. And so that it becomes much easier for the end consumer to be able to say, can I put in my genetics data? Can I upload my blood reports? And can I put in all these other things so that you will get the final report as well?
Wow. As you are talking, I'm almost getting convinced that I'm going to now reach out to you after our conversation and say, map me, please.
Sure, I like that. Map me, please. I need to do the...
Absolutely. But Anu, my next question is that given the state of healthcare in our country and, the fact that doctors virtually drive healthcare, what are some of the challenges in integrating genomics into mainstream healthcare?
So I think like 10 years, 11 years ago when we started, it was a difficult thing, right? So I think some doctors used it. Mostly these were doctors who were like the clinical geneticists or people who were familiar with like serious diseases and all that. I think this whole concept of using it for prevention, we started that in the country. And it took a lot of effort to sort of bring that forward to the doctors. But the clinical part, I think we started seeing first uptake by oncologists, then the OBGYNs. And then I think we also start seeing now neurologists and a few other doctors who have started using it. But what has changed over the last 10, 11 years is that many of the hospitals are now making this part of their preventive health check as an option. Right? So some large hospitals today actually have made this part of their program. The large chains like your Lal Path Lab and others are also making it part of your plan. But also, I think these days, I think insurance companies are now offering it to their consumers because they know that this is going to give positive outcomes for them. So I think it has become a lot more mainstream than it was 11 years ago. 11 years ago, I think I would go to a doctor and try to explain, and they'd say, why do you want to bother me with data that is not going to help me to treat my patient today? But I think today, I think a lot of, especially some senior doctors and a lot of the junior doctors, I think, are familiar with genomics. But I think what is required is more a change in their curriculum, which doesn't happen, right? But what the way it has, they're currently trained is through other conferences, CMEs and others, which I think doesn't get to everybody, right? So you might have doctors in Delhi, Hyderabad, and others might be much more familiar than, let's say, somebody who's in a small town, right? So that's the challenge, I think, unless you integrate it in the syllabus.
Yeah, well said. And Anu, when it comes to mapping genomics or your genes, how do you address privacy and ethical concerns? Or are there any privacy and ethical concerns?
Of course, I think there are, because genetics is something that once you have, that is your it is your personal data, right? So right from day one, I think when we started, we make sure that people give two forms of consent. The first is a consent that they know that they're doing a genetic test, right? Because you do it, you have the data, and I think once you have it, that's something that's not genuine. The second is more a consent around using anonymized data for further research, right? Now, most people don't have a problem with that, but some people might have a problem, right? Because you are not using individualized data, but you're using it as an aggregate, because ultimately you want to use this for better research, better outcomes, and so on. So these are two things that we would do from a consent point of view. But there are also other things that you need to do on the cybersecurity part of it, and also make sure that you separate out data as much as possible. So we separate out both in terms of permissions, but also in terms of who gets access, and also physically separate these data pieces out so that nobody can put those bits together unless they really, no. So I think right now, I think that's what we are doing. And also, I think data privacy laws, hopefully, you have certain restrictions, whether you're using those 21 CFR or HIPAA compliance. I think you will get to all of that anyway.
Thank you. And Anu, given the fact that genomics has such an amazing potential for each one of our individual healths, is Mapmygenomics doing anything to be able to educate the public and to be able to raise awareness about it?
Absolutely. I think I do my own podcast as well called Genomics Gupshup, where I invite doctors and other professionals who use genomics and educate over there. That is number one. The second thing that we've been doing is we write a lot of blogs. We have obviously do a lot of work on social media. But I think the recent project that I've been working on in the company, which I think is truly going to help a lot of people, is what we've created on learn.mapmygenome. So when you go to learn, you can essentially look at any gene. You can look at any disease. You can look at anything. Search for it. It'll tell you what it's going to do, what diseases it affects, what are the products that you can look at. And also, I think, when you're looking at, let's say, a bacteria, is it a good bacteria? Is it a bad bacteria? What do you need to do about it? And so on. So I think we are making it a lot more accessible. And I think a lot of the doctors find it useful, but also consumers find it useful. So I think we are seeing some of that. But I also do a lot of talks, and we do conferences and many other things like that. But I think there are some things that are more permanent, like learn and our channels.
Correct. Well said. So I have time for 2 or 3 more questions. My next question is, how do you envision the role of genomics evolving over the next few years?
So I think today, it is still, like I mentioned, it still is not yet fully mainstream, right? And I think it will become more like your part of your medical report. So for instance, I think if everybody or every pharmacy or let's say at every baseline, we had that as your record, then it becomes a lot easier to be able to say, for insurance, for instance, are you giving the right medicine, right? Are you, because you're paying for it, are you actually spending on the right kind of drugs? That's number one. The second thing is that epigenetics is going to become a lot better understood, right? So today, I think it's expensive to do those tests to understand your biological age and what's going on with your actual health of your lung, liver, and so on. But I think over the next few years, you'll find that becoming a lot more mainstream as well. So your microbiome, your epigenetics will become mainstream. And I think that might ultimately replace what you're seeing today as your regular blood tests, because it's giving you a much more deeper understanding of it. So I think it'll become, as the costs go down, as accessibility increases, I think we'll see that these will slowly start replacing some of the products that we have. Right now, blood tests are still very essential because you're still measuring it at that point of time. But, when you're measuring like an HbA1c, you're measuring 3 months average. But some things, it depends on whether you ate something today or not. What your epigenetics is telling you is what is going on cumulatively as well. So I think it will start to change the way we look at health, because you also start to understand how environment changes outcomes. You can also start to understand, how do you actually use this information in the best possible and more precise way. So I think those days are not far where we'll start seeing it becoming mainstream and becoming part of every doctor's office and every pharmacy, and also every nutritionist and others, because ultimately a lot of what we eat and how we exercise also makes a big difference with that.
Amazing. Anu, my last question to you, and this is moving away from my genome to Anu Acharya as an individual. You're a published poet and you're also a columnist. Tell me a little bit about your poems and how do you balance your creative pursuits with your professional work?
I think for me, they go together. And if you look at the poetry that I write, it's called, it's on science, non-science, and nonsense. Right? So many times I think I look at a problem in science and I would write about it, right? It was more for me to gain knowledge, but it became easier. So as an example, I think many years ago, we had this product called laser capture microdissection. I looked at it and I said, how do I understand this? I wrote a poem about it and I published it. Later on, the manufacturer came to me and said, this is the first time somebody's looked at something as like a laser capture microdissection and is writing a poem on it, and they wanted to publish. Nice. So I think for me, it is more about simplifying things and also making, putting your mind away also sometimes, right? So when I do nonsense, it is mostly to write something fun. And in many ways, I think when you are in a business, you need to sometimes cut off and you need to be able to do that. So I've sort of made it, both in and out of business. When it is science, it's part of what I do. But when it is nonsense, it is just for fun. And I think, it's very important to have fun while you're doing anything. Absolutely. And so for me, I think whether it is writing, whether it is, doing something else, it is always to be able to be enjoying what I'm doing. And I think for me, genomics has been fun. And it has also been fun to be able to just look at anything else, whether it is politics, whether it is just something difficult, something that is bothering people, and be able to write about it. And I think it tells what your state of mind was at that point of time and what you felt about it. And you can never capture that again if you don't actually do that.
Correct. And I completely agree with you.
You've written 9 books. Yes.
Absolutely. But on that note, Anu, I just want to say thank you so much for speaking to me about your own journey. I think your conversation with me on genomics was a complete eye-opener for me. I've read about it, but the amount of depth you went into today was, for a layman, was absolutely incredible. I mean, I can see it is the future of healthcare. It is more important than the future of the healthcare. It is our own ability to understand our own bodies. Thank you again for speaking to me, and all the very best to you.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Ashton. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.